Joy, just from following you and knowing your story online, you've talked about your father's emotional unavailability and then his eventual abandonment. So I would love to hear from you just how that shaped you. Let's just jump right in and
What a place to begin.
tell me, yeah.
Um, well, I think growing up, I always thought that I was the only one. Like, especially growing up in a highly conservative, religious world, I felt super misunderstood, and no one seemed to be able to hold the complex emotions that I was presenting in that space. It has shaped me in that I understand how important it is to speak for those that are misunderstood. I have learned over the last decade that like my gift of what I thought was like being an empath is actually like a lot of trauma responses. So learning
Gotcha.
yeah, I mean, I think I just always thought I was broken for a long time. Coming into being a mother and a woman, and now this stage of life, I'm realizing all of us have trauma. All of us have experienced feeling othered and feeling like a misfit and misunderstood. And for me, I think a lot of fathers were emotionally unavailable to definitely their daughters.
Mm,
I think it's rare to have a father that is deeply attuned to his child's emotional needs, especially in our generation. And so, yeah, I it's now we're in the place where we're like mothering ourselves and mothering our kids, and that's happening at the same time. And
yeah.
what I thought was a burden, I realize is a wonderful perspective to help me connect to other people.
Were you able to my question here, like, were you able to see, okay, this is coming from the way that you were being treated and the way your family was reacting, or were you always just like, no, it's just me? Does that make sense? Like, when were you able to pinpoint, wait, it was you were emotionally unavailable to me and this caused this?
I think well, that's a really good question, right? Because it's such a layered unfolding.
Mhm.
I'm going to pace myself and not try to produce any sort of answer that is presentable or like polished. Try not to be
Yeah.
polished about this. I think I always knew that both me and my mom were being treated unfairly, and I just called it abuse. I knew he was abusive,
Okay.
and I didn't have compassion. Well, I think as a child, I had deep compassion that bonded me to him in an unhealthy way, where he felt like I thought if I loved him well enough, it could save him from his own despair or from
Mm.
suicide or from all of these things. And I always was petitioning for my mom to leave because I knew how unhealthy it was for her, and how isolated I felt from in relationship with him. And so I always bonded with her, and
Okay.
he really disliked that that I bonded with her.
Okay.
And but she was social, and she always I feel, there's that parable about the two wolves. It's the wolf you feed, right? There's like the wolf of darkness and the wolf of light. And it's been told in many different ways, but I feel like my dad was this wolf of negativity. My mom was this wolf of positivity. And she was very connected with God, not in an unhealthy way, in a healthy
Mm.
way. But it was more the community that was kind of couldn't hold space for my emotions and my grief. And so it was like glossed over. And that really created so much dissonance and frustration in me that I couldn't tell the truth. Or even if I did, people are like, that's just, like, give it to God, give it to God. So there was a lot of unhealthy stuffing of my difficult feelings rather than being able to process them in a safe space. And so I think that's when I turned on myself and thought, oh, the problem must be me. But I
Uh-huh.
always knew that like the wolf of darkness in my father was something that I felt was in me that I couldn't rid myself of, that like I
Oh.
was also dark. And so
Oh.
it took, my mom ended up leaving when I was 12. And I haven't had a relationship with my dad since I was a teenager. And so I had that awareness early on that I just called it abuse and that he was negative and he was toxic and we didn't have a relationship. But then over the last 10 years, as I've started to understand the way generational trauma exists in the body, and that so much of it is linked to an inability to be authentic and to live lives of authenticity in our fullness, that it turns into a very toxic human being, and that was what was happening in my dad, and that it really had nothing to do with me. I think he never fed the wolf of light within himself. He was just so much negativity, feeding, and I did too. I was just feeding into that, trying to help him. And so as I've learned, I'm like, hey, this is a choice to, I am not broken. I'm not dark. I just have been feeding that wolf of darkness my whole life. And then learning about neuroscience and how when we're exposed to something beautiful, it takes 20 seconds for it to become imprint in the brain. But when we're exposed to something dark and negative, it only takes 1 second. So like we have to feed that wolf of light 20, the goodness compared to the negativity. And I was like, oh, this is a ratio. This is a choice. There's so many layers here that I have unfolded that have helped me realize self-compassion is what heals us. Authenticity is what heals us. So.
Wow, that was incredible. I learned so much. I didn't know the wolf story, and I'd never heard that about the good taking 20 seconds.
Yeah,
It's really interesting.
that story is told a lot in like addiction circles, because you know, whichever wolf you feed, it either devours you or you know, like
yeah.
Once we acknowledge that that exists, it shifts everything. But not understanding that it's even something that's like happening in the brain or happening in the body, then we just blame ourselves.
Yeah, so good. You've also shared about self-abandonment and then how that started at home and then was reinforced in the church. And I was really interested in that. I grew up in the church as well, and I just wondered what you noticed and how did that make you feel?
Yeah, self-abandonment is a key value in the church. So I grew up in Church of Christ, but also was in very evangelical circles. Okay, I went to Pepperdine. Yes. Yes, our trauma is very enmeshed.
Yeah, you did a reel, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I think I was really scared to name that for a long time, because we were taught, or at least I was, I'll just speak for myself. So much of it is subliminal, and it is like saviorism is honored, and self-denial is like, that is the ultimate martyr syndrome, right? Like self-abandonment is martyrdom, which means you are willing to die for the cause that is the cause of someone else. And that means that you must self-abandon or connect your worth so deeply with the worth of that identity that is like outside of yourself, that you can't honor yourself. And it's very confusing, because I always thought self-abandonment was what I was going for, that like the church said, this is like, you're doing a really good job. Don't trust your thoughts, don't trust your feelings, don't trust your intuition. That's spiritual, like that's going to take you to the dark side. And if you lean into that, you're going to go too far, and then the demons are going to consume you, and you're going to not be able to do the important work for God. And so I drew these lines, these very, like when we talk about putting ourselves in a box, I enclosed myself into a box of self-abandonment, because I thought it was the most holy and honoring thing I could possibly do for God. And even, you know, I don't know, it gave me multiple autoimmune diseases, rashes. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which the root of that is there's so much inflammation in the body, and adrenaline spikes and cortisol spikes. And, you know, and then when I would say these things in church, like, this is how I feel, this is my grief, this is my sadness, this is like, we're abandoning the earth, we're abandoning women. And they would say, oh, don't say that. Like, if you dwell on that, that's toxic. That's going to take you to the dark side. You give that to God. And so it was like the church was saying, hey, here's this like little deposit box for all your worries. So don't process them. Don't think about them. Put them in that box, and God will deal with them. Or even when you're praying, like, please God, if you love me and honor me and I'm a good servant to you. Like, there's so much victim mindset built in, and servitude and secondary worth, that causes us to believe that if we are laying ourselves down to be run over in whatever ways are coming, that it's honorable. At least that is what I absorbed.
Yeah. I'm so intrigued. I feel like this is a subject I could talk to you all day about. We'll move on this time, but I probably will have questions that I'm going to come back to on that.
Mm-hmm.
But recently you shared a reel about how you've come back to swimming after avoiding it so long because your dad had a connection to it. And that just really spoke to me. I lost my dad 6 years ago. I found that there are things that I avoid, or I don't know. It was just hard hitting for me. So, what has that journey been like for you?
First, I'm really sorry for the loss of your father.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like, in a sense, well, swimming was something that I had forgotten that my dad did. And as I've been on this journey of trying to have compassion for myself and embrace, well, I have a trans child. First, I think this is kind of the root of when I started to realize all of the parts of myself and the parts of my dad that I had cut off from myself, thinking that those were toxic to me. If I was to address them or deal with them, that it would infect me. And so when my kid came out first as queer and then over time trans, it forced me to confront, there are all of these parts of myself that like my kid was embracing the wholeness of themselves, all of these layers of, like there was no part of him that he wasn't embracing as worthy of looking at, embracing, being curious about. Curiosity has definitely been the thing that has led me to compassion for my dad, like being curious about, I had just cut him off thinking I am better without him. And I think so much of our society, that's what we were told, is like, if this thing is toxic, cut it off.
Right.
If this thing is bad in you, cut it off. And I think before we had a lot of the information that we have now about trauma and how it manifests in the body, we thought that that was good, that that was like the best thing that we could do for ourselves. I thought that for 25 years. But what I realized was that by not acknowledging who he was as a full person, by just thinking he's bad, every part of him, every part of me that resembled or had an essence of his genetics, his character, his mindset, those were parts of myself I hated. And so my child modeled for me, hey, mama, like, it's okay to be curious about yourself. It's not going to lead you to the dark place, because what happens, like Parker Palmer talks about this a lot when it comes to depression, that so much of us, when we are experiencing darkness, we run from it. We don't look at it. And that's definitely what the church models. And so I ran from it for so long, and the shadow just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And my illnesses got more intense and more confusing. And my whole body for years was just covered in hives. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Right? Like, what's wrong with me, rather than what am I running from? And once I turned and looked at that darkness of my dad, it was like it's like the shadow shrank, and I got closer and I saw him as a traumatized person that had abandoned himself when he was really young. And I realized, oh my God, like, he was a full person, and I have really deprived myself of wholeness by cutting all of those parts off. And so I started getting curious and talking to my mom, like, what was he like when you first met him? And talking to my aunt, who is his sister, and saying, what brought him joy when he was a child? And so she's telling me about how he loved to swim. And I had forgotten that, and that he was also a writer. But I have started, I'm an author now. And I realized, like, the version of him that I knew once he was a middle-aged man that resented his existence, what it had become, he was still swimming, but he had to do it perfect. And he had to it was about competition, and it would make him so anxious. Like, that's the part I saw. So I never wanted to have any part of that. And with writing, he had this job as a writer, but he was writing about computers and tech, and like nothing about being a human being, right? So like, it was like all of his gifts had been manipulated and pushed into these forms that could be about success and achievement and perfection, and doing it so that it was perceived well to others. So that's only the part that I saw, and that was very toxic to me. And so once I started digging back into the child part of him, I realized this is actually like, this could have been his healing modality, this way of him to express and be free and be like playful in these elements. And he couldn't do it, but I'm going to reclaim that. I'm going to do that. And so that's when I started swimming, and that really transformed. Like, it gave me a new relationship with the child version of him.
I love that. I love that. Have you kept it up?
Yes. Well, I started swimming in the pool on his 70th birthday last year. That was the
Wow.
first day that I stepped into the pool. And then I have since done my best. I'm trying to become an ocean swimmer now. And so it's,
Brave.
it's very symbolic in all of these ways. So I'm trying to do it in my own way. Like,
Yeah.
I met him there, and then now I have the expanse to do it in a new way.
Wow. Very neat. You've spoken in this conversation and online about how unprocessed sadness, it doesn't just disappear, and then how you've learned to sit with that grief. And you've talked about that some today, but that's a very hard thing to do. And most of us don't know where to even begin. So what
Yeah.
would be your advice?
Well, I have looked to wise women that have found tools of holding space for their grief. So much of that, really, I think I've learned it through my photography career, because over the last 20 years, like I've documented a lot of people in the midst of great grief are in the midst of losing a child, or have lost a child, or have experienced loss in a variety of ways. And they invited me in to either be there while that experience was happening as a documentarian, or to honor the memory of that. And so it's basically like, I still am navigating how to hold space for grief, and I'm not good at it, but I think how have I seen it modeled? And so being face to face with it, number one, like just not trying to fix it. I think that was the thing that made me feel so many toxic feelings around grief and not knowing how to hold space for others, is that I was told not to look at it, or like to pretty it up, or to fix the problem, and like to be a savior to this person who is struggling. Those things don't work. And so by being a documentarian, it made me have to just learn how to be present with them in it.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, my husband and I were hired to document a family whose little boy, it was an accidental death, and they have created a foundation for him. And they invited us to do a film of like almost a recreation of what happened, as advocacy to spread the word of how moments matter, and how little hands are stronger than you think, and how things can happen in just a moment. And so we sat with them while they
Wow.
grieved openly in front of the camera for several days. And my job that I was being paid for was to just witness it, compassionately witness it. Don't say a word. You don't have to fix this. There's no fixing it. There's no healing this grief. They're not coming back. And so it was like I learned what could be beneficial in those moments. They so compassionately taught us how to just be a witness, and that's the actual definition of the word compassion, is to suffer with. That's the Latin. And so I was like, oh, this was something I could never do for myself.
Yeah.
And so I have tried to practice that. And the more people that I've documented since then, I have learned, like, my anxiety of trying to know how to do it has disappeared, because that is not what is being required in those moments. It's just to be with, that's very much what Jesus did. That is like that the church does not help us learn how to do, which is just suffer with, instead of judge or look away or redirect or deposit elsewhere. And it's like a wave, right? You ride the wave all the way to the top, and it's going to come down and it's going to go up again, but you just ride it.
Really good. Really good advice. That must have been quite a learning experience. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Healing can be super messy. It's often non-linear,
Mhm.
especially in relationships. And I know you've mentioned this, and I've had this in my marriage. I'll be going through something, or I started therapy, and that's not where he was at that time.
Mhm.
And then he goes through something and changes, and
Yeah.
that's part of relationships, and there's an ebb and flow, and sometimes you're right there and you're there for each other, and other times it's like a little bit isolating. And how have you managed that?
Not well.
Love it.
Yeah, that sure is the constant thing, isn't it? Like if you're on a healing journey, it is never going to end. It is never going to stop. And if you got
Yeah.
kids, they're on their own way. Awareness it can feel like death, because like when you're numb and you're not seeking to heal anything, you're not seeing it.
Yeah.
And so I think my husband and I, we coasted for 10 years without being on a healing journey, being married. And then my body started getting sick. And he has definitely, for the majority of our marriage, been in like a support caretaker role, because my body has been so activated that he has stepped into that role of support much more than I have. And I've been the one that has been working the majority of the time as well. And so I think once I started to address my own trauma, he carried it. He carried the family for us for until he couldn't, right? And then once I got to the place where I was like, oh, okay, like I'm good, I see it all, I like, okay, like, and let's build this beautiful new life together, and we can have a whole different kind of marriage, like a rebirth. And that he was like, what are you talking about? Like, and then he fell apart because he had to, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can only carry, I mean, that's a long time to carry someone else's pain without ever addressing your own. um and over the last, like 6 years ago, he over the few years, he lost 3 different friends to suicide. And I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes during that time frame. And we thought that our baby might die, because I was pregnant at that point, and there was a lot of fear. And so he didn't get to process his grief, because again, he had to step in because my
Yeah.
body was failing and our kids needed that. And I think, yeah. So the past couple years, we have basically, like, it's like holding the baton, like it's on fire, and we're just passing it back and forth. And I think kind of getting into that space of like, oh, we're never going to be in the same spot. And that's instead of, I mean, there's been many times where we're like, maybe this is over. Like maybe this relationship is done. And I think we've had to come to the point where, yes, like we have attended, like, what is that quote? Like, you attend the many different funerals of the person that you've been married to as they evolve into their reborn self.
Yeah.
And so it's like, instead of, when we get into a fight now, it can be argument, conversation, whatever. We have to really be careful with our words, because when the body's in fight or flight, we try to protect ourselves, and we have to set up strong boundaries around what can be said, and that we cannot compare what we're dealing with now to who we were even 3 years ago,
Yeah.
because we are learning tools to help us pass that back and forth. And like, I used to be so hurt when he wouldn't understand all my weird ideas about art and things like that. And I would think, you don't love me, you don't see me. And what I just was not holding space, that he was a whole person having his whole experience. And like, that we are never going to be, at least for us, it has rarely been that we are riding the same wave at the same time. And I think that's the only way a partnership can work, is honoring, oh, you're at the top of that wave. Okay, you ride it. I'm down here. Okay. And Brene Brown talks about, I don't know if you've heard this, but her and her partner, Steve, I think that's his name, every day they wake up and they say, okay, I'm at 20%. What percent are you at? And they'll be like, okay, I can do 80, and like sometimes it's 50-50. So it's like, instead of assuming the other person is low or high or just assuming anything, it's what percent are you capable of today? And if both of us are at 20%, how are we going to find that other 60% for the kids to be okay?
Right. Really good. Thank you for sharing so openly and honestly. That's incredible. Which leads me to my next question, which is about vulnerability, because that's kind of the cornerstone of your work now.
Yes.
So, was there like a moment that made you crack open to be like, this is it for me and this is my path? Or how did you get there? Or maybe that's just who you
not
are. I
one
don't know.
moment. I don't know. I do think it's
This is very hard to be vulnerable, and not just with people, but online. And you do it so beautifully.
Oh, well, thank you. I used to be a lot more vulnerable online. I think the majority of my followership for a long time on social media, as I was speaking to an echo chamber, very conservative Christian mom circle.
Okay.
Circle of thousands of people.
Okay.
And these were the people that I was mentoring in my work, that I was, writing to. And so when I would share something vulnerable, I would have a lot of people that would come alongside. And I never experienced what it was to be vulnerable and be othered.
Gotcha.
It was like,
so you're in a different space now.
I was like safe to be vulnerable because I would always like, there would be like, when I go back and read a lot of the posts from years ago, I would say this really hard thing, but then always at the end, it would be like, but God is good, and God has, even if it doesn't work out, like for his glory, and so it would be, everyone would be like, praise, yes, yes, yes. And like, this is not a knock on anyone that's in church, because I still have a very connected relationship with God, but I always was putting a bow on the end of my vulnerability, which made it safe. And over the last few years, as my own spiritual journey has expanded because of my child being authentic and me realizing it benefits me nothing if I'm not like, it's not in my DNA to be unauthentic. And it was making me sicker. Like the hives were coming back. My blood sugar numbers were through the roof. And I was just like, I can't, like, there's no sustainability in this for a life. And so like, actually last month, on Instagram, I changed where it says, you put like your bio thing, and I put Artist of Vulnerability. And instantly when I put it, I was like, I have to take it off. And then it was like, I had already changed it. Like, you can only change it a certain amount of times. And I was like, maybe nobody will see it. And because when you look up vulnerability in the dictionary, it is a weakness, like we have been taught, our society views vulnerability and even defines it as, this is something to be avoided at all costs. This will lead to isolation. This will lead to misunderstanding. This will lead to, and so, but then when I couldn't change it, I was like, oh man, I guess I'm stepping into the next level here, where I have to help people understand that vulnerability is something you get to define for yourself. And this is actually something worthy of honor. And so much of that in my work as a photographer, like I have heard women for 20 years say, don't focus on me, like, I'll just stand behind the children, like, just don't show my face, or like, in 20 pounds lighter, like, then I'll be worthy of documentation. But then the time never comes where they will deem themselves worthy of being preserved. And so I just like, that is like a fire that rises up in me, and that leads to even more sickness. So I just have to say it, like, you are so worthy, and your inability to see your vulnerabilities like as a gift, as the portal in which you have authentic connection with other people, like, you are denying yourself wholeness.
Yeah. So now you brought up more questions for me. So that brought up two.
Okay.
So I did want to know, like, have you had a deconstruction of faith, or where are you at now in your faith journey?
I guess it's undefinable. And I'm totally okay with
I
that.
can get that.
Yeah. I love to ask questions now, and instead of trying to find an answer that can be like that I can be sure of, I have had to learn more to there's this quote, Leonard Cohen has this quote that if you do not become the ocean, you will be seasick every day. And it just resonated so deeply because like I've always gotten motion sickness, first of all. And I have just been starting to think so much recently about, I wonder if like my inability to feel steady and like feeling anxious and dizzy in my life all these years was because I was trying to be sure of everything. And to become the ocean means that you release, that it's fluid, that they're like, I was told who in the church, I was told who's in, who's out. And that if you like you can be loving to those people, but to embrace them fully as like the body of Christ is unloving. And so, once my kid came out, all of my Christian friends were like, if you love them, you will help them know how wrong they are. And I had a lot of people that I'm no longer in relationship with because they are so horrified by my support of my kid. And I just started asking questions. Like I think maybe my belief system is one of curious compassion at this point of like, I just see so many of the stories in the Bible that Jesus modeled, like that we were told what those stories meant in church. Like, this means this. And I'm like, interesting, because maybe the whole point was just to offer compassionate witnessing, and that it is not our job. Like, I mean, even the church would be like, yes, your only job is to love, but also judge.
Right.
And so my child has shown me that God is so creative. And as an artist, like I just have embraced that so strongly that like, what would the world be without the color orange? What would the world be without birds? And there's so many animals that are like, they're both, like they're male and female and in the middle. And like, if all of those creatures are made by God and the earth is made by God and it has all of these facets and it's an entire rainbow of painting, and that we are creators and we are made unique, like to say that one of those things is wrong and not made in the image of God, what a pitfall for us in understanding the magnitude of God.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. Very well said. How did you describe it? What were the two words you just described your face?
Curious, compassion.
Compassion. That was
Compassionate
it.
curiosity, yes.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to commit it to memory. You talked about women, not really wanting to be in the frame and not believing themselves worthy. And what has been your relationship with your own body?
Well, I think diabetes, really getting that, helped me understand my body on a different level, like a level of wholeness, where it's kind of like we were talking about. So in Madeleine L'Engle's book, A Wrinkle in Time, it's my favorite book. She has this line where it's like it's a whole thing, but there's this line that says basically that the gift of your faults is what will save you from the darkness. And so like, I have to give myself injections many times per day. I have to prick my fingers. And like my biggest fear growing up was needles. I guess I just went my whole life up until that point, not realizing how stress impacted my physiology, my blood sugar, my like what is only, I think for most of us, until we suffer some kind of illness or disease that brings us face to face with the way stress impacts our body, trauma, whatever, the way that we deal with things. Migraines, I had those for many, many years, still struggle with them when I'm like really fixated on things and my posture is hunched over. I started to come to consciousness about my body not being a separate entity or an it, but a being that I was co-creating with, and where God was trying to communicate to me the ways that I could care for myself. And so I started seeing these times when I had to give myself an injection, like it would cause me so much stress. And it literally was like a life or death thing. I had to do it or I would die. And I had to make it into a ritual. And so that was the beginning of seeing my relationship with my body as a ceremonial opportunity to attune with myself as holy and not seeing my body as separate from me, but that has been carrying me and with me all along. And so now when I do my injections, I have like my little self-compassion crystal and I make it into like a fully sensory experience. So it's like a way that I'm attuning compassionately with my body and like learning to care for her and loving her. And instead of just forcing this thing that gives me anxiety, and even like the way that like when I get a headache or I start to feel pain in my body, or and even everything that's gone with my hormones with perimenopause, like I'm like, what is the divine communicating to me through my body that is giving me an opportunity for ceremony?
I love that. It's so easy to disconnect from our bodies and
Yes.
and to see them as something, just separate and apart and not, I don't know, not special or good sometimes, especially if you're dealing with health issues or you start to think you're broken. It's really easy to disassociate with that. So I really
Yes.
like that advice. You are passionate about being present. You wrote a book on it. So teach us everything.
Well, you can't write about something that you haven't totally messed up for millions of times. Yes, it's because, I mean, really it's rooted in, to become present is to have to encounter everything that we have chosen to numb ourselves from. And that is why this is why the world is the way it is. This is why there's so much isolation. Isolation is a disease of wasting human beings, believing that shame will somehow make us better, that by like things are so hard that it means that we're not worthy to be in that moment, or it feels so overwhelming that just presence is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
This is the root of why there's so much addiction, and I think every ailment, every separation of relationship, every impact on our bodies and our inability to love ourselves comes back to our difficulty with understanding what it is to be present. And to be present means that we do have to encounter everything that grieves us. And so presence is inevitably intertwined. That's why it's like when you've been numbing, or, you've been whatever numbing technique it is we've chosen that we all have, when you go off of it, even if it's your phone, like every moment you're encountered with, oh, this is painful. This is why I have been numbing. And then we just find a different kind of numbing technique that we think is healthier.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, yes, we need, sometimes it's necessary in times of survival when life happens, like we revert to those things, and there's no shame for that, because life is really hard. And sometimes we have to get up in the middle of the night and care for the children and to feel our grief and face our trauma at the same time. That's too much. So I just want to be really clear about how I'm not advocating for forcing presence if it feels like it's going to be harmful, but it is, I believe, the portal into joy, because true joy is only possible when you hold space for your grief. Yeah. So it's a practice. That's also the important thing to recognize, is it's not something you can ever perfect. It's not anything you're ever going to get good at. Like having tools in your tool belt of like making things into ritual and honoring things and finding ways to like have softness come along with the process, and not looking at how other people are showing up in their lives and thinking that that's some sort of metric that we have to attune with, because that's inevitably going to feel like dissonance in our body. It's more about what is the child within saying, like what kind of presence, how was I encountering and having a relationship with the present moment that brought me an animalistic kind of joy in childhood. And it was like riding my bike with my arms spread wide, or laying on the grass, or painting. These times when it was like I was fully in my body, but I was focused on something beautiful.
Mhm.
And so expression and art, like as an artist, I just inevitably come back to that like, and even Martha Beck, her new book that came out about anxiety, she's talking so much about how the salve for anxiety, the antidote for anxiety that like scientifically reduces anxiety is to be creative. And so she was saying, well, it also is the opposite, which is to be creative, is to like, instead of waiting till the anxiety comes and thinking, oh, I have to force creativity, to instead think, if I make a practice of expression in some sort of creative way, or if I can like chop these vegetables and like look at them and savor them and make this a sensory experience, that's going to help the anxiety be continually lessened. It's just a matter of practicing it. This has to be a regular practice. And when we abandon our practice, that is inevitably when anxiety and stress then arises again.
Yeah. Wow, very interesting. You named a couple in there, but do you just have like a couple quick tools you could give us?
Most of us are always holding our breath.
I do that. I've noticed that, and now I'm making like a conscious effort to breathe.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way it's become really, we have minimized the power of breath because it's something we think that we are already doing. And I've seen, like, I often, even before I understood like this, the neuroscience of presence, as a photographer, I would always notice that when people would hold their breath, like most people, like I would say 99% of people, when they are in front of a camera, they are holding their breath. And that is what makes them not recognize themselves in photos, because that is not the authentic self. That's the like frozen self, the
Yeah.
presented version, masked, horrified to be seen version of themselves. And I would find myself just being like, okay, let's just breathe together. And after they would take like a deep breath, and like that we would be looking in each other's eyes, like I would put the camera down and look them in the eyes, and we would take a breathe together, like on a cellular level, they would enter the present moment. And that
Mm,
is when I would capture the image that they would recognize themselves in.
yeah.
And so I think that like the one breath thing that I often do with my kids, it's like a 2 sniffs in, and then and like the way that like our mind is disconnected from our body. And so the salve to entering the present moment is to form the cellular connection between the two on a physiological level. And that can happen and does happen every time you have an intentional breath.
I had no idea. That's amazing. Well, that's a quick tool everyone can use. So that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love your passion for getting women and mothers into the frame. I know that's something most of us avoid. Like if I go
Mm-hmm.
back through to my first few kids, which was when I would have been like young and primed to be in photos, there's none. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
there. I made more of an effort with the younger ones, knowing that I wanted some of those. But now, most of us, we're aging, and then you want to be in them even less.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just if you can kind of like walk us through like why that's so important, how we can do it better.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so we have to eliminate the binary of like that there's a way that we're doing it right and there's a way that we're doing it wrong, right? So we're just like eliminating that there's any right way to do this.
Mhm.
But coming to the understanding that we are never seeing we are always seeing ourselves through the lens of what other people have told us about ourselves. And
Mm.
so a first step that I would recommend is go and access all of the photos of all the different versions of yourself. Like go through the albums, go through, and I'm like from the time of childhood up. And I did that a couple weeks ago, and I have done it recently. And it's a practice I try to redo every time, because I'm looking at who she was and thinking, why was she making those choices about her appearance at that time? And so I was looking at my senior picture, and I was going to the tanning salon a lot. My eyebrows were super, super thin. I had blonde hair, like there were lots of makeup. And I looked, and I immediately knew how I felt by seeing the way that, like, the self I was trying to present to the world. And I had started plucking my eyebrows really thin because a boy at school had told me that it looked like I had caterpillars on my eyebrows, and I didn't want to lose belonging. I wanted to be accepted. And so I'm like, oh, if I do this, this is important. And like, I didn't want to be like super white, because like all of the girls that, you know, that seemed to be popular, like they were tan, and like, you know, we were going to the tanning salon, and I bought like the most expensive membership, and I was blonde because I thought that was what would make. All of those decisions about my appearance were based on seeking external validation that I was worthy of being seen. And so, but then then I look at those pictures of me when I was an early mama, and thinking that I was fat, and, you know, I would just like, there's no pictures of my body hardly at all. I'm behind my children. And, it was because I was presenting those photographs to other people. Like, we are viewing ourselves always through the way that we think others will perceive us. And so many of those stories and the decisions that we make about our appearance are based upon what people told us 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And so I found this picture of me when I was like 7 or 8, and I saw wonder in her. And like, my hair wasn't brushed, and I was wearing like actually an outfit that was like very similar, like overall situation happening here. And I just like, I wasn't presenting myself for anyone. So I think looking back through photos and trying to find the ones that align with who you're becoming now, in the consciousness of who you are now. Like, we soften and ideally we're becoming the child version of ourselves after going through all of the healing like that, or like through the healing, that's what we're accessing. And so it is so important. And like, I just encourage any woman listening to go back through her images and find those, and like, oh, I made that decision because this person said that to me. And like, come to be curious, right?
Yeah.
And whatever the answer is, like, the body knows, like, believe the body and hold space for that. Write out those reasons as to why you made those decisions. And then look at those reasons and decide if you're going to give any more energy to that crap. Because especially like at this form of life, we have zero extra energy to spend on believing any unconscious stories that are keeping us bound up.
Yeah. Yes. And then what?
Well, and then it's,
And then
once you're
hop in?
aware, because then you get to be like, I get to do this for me. I get to show, I get to do this for little me. I get to do this for the me that hopefully is alive 20 years from now, that will look back and be like, yes, Joy, like, yes, queen, like, yes, you showed up for yourself and weren't making like, you decide that the decisions you make for yourself and that showing up for yourself is unbelievably worthy of documentation. And even like right now, the fires are burning, where I went to college and where I grew up. And I've been watching all of these videos of these people with their photo albums clinging to their chest as they're running away from it's the only thing that matters. And the belief that there's going to be some time where we are going to be believing that we're worthy and perfect enough to be documented, it will not come. And so you have to decide, now is all we have. This is the practice of presence, showing up for yourself and saying, I am worthy now because of who I am authentically, and that I will no longer restrict myself from being seen by myself, by my kids, by my family, living life to the fullness because I'm concerned about appearance.
That was so powerful. got me verklempt there, Joy. That was really good. Really good. For all the women listening who feel lost or overwhelmed or stuck, what would you say to her to help her begin finding herself now?
Breathe. In my book, I have this 4-step plan, and it's based on neuroscience, which is number one, enter your body. Like, stop trying to make sense of everything. Because so often when we're encountering these things that we're experiencing, we're thinking, why?
Yeah.
And why is it only drains our energy and keeps us vibrating in a very low energetic space that will keep us there, that makes it very hard to escape. And so stop asking why. And instead of stop trying to make sense of everything, and instead enter your actual senses. This is also a wonderful tool. Name something you hear, name something you feel. If you're in fight or flight, hand on chest, breathe. What can I hear? Okay, right now I can hear the birds singing outside. The birds are saying it's safe. Okay, I can release. What can I feel? I can feel the cold desk under my fingertips. This means that I'm in my body. Okay, I'm safe. What can I smell? Can smell, like, I can smell the salt air of the sea right now. This means that, like, the ocean is here, like Mother Earth is here. Like, you go through all the senses, you ground yourself, the grounding process of being in the moment, become present.
Okay.
That is what we do. And then you ask yourself, what matters right now? How can I just be present in this moment? And this is like a lot of the practice that I do when I'm photographing people too. Like, we can't thrive, we can't feel compassion, we can't be curious if we're in survival mode. So we have to find a way to be grounded and enter our senses so that we can actually enter our bodies and let our bodies be the receivers of communication. And then we're listening to our bodies. The compassionate curiosity is the root of everything that heals and draws us closer in relationship with other people. Like, when I was trying to convince my husband that I was right, so for so many years of the marriage, it blocked me from being able to hear him because I thought I knew what was right and wrong. And then once you zoom out and you realize there are about 1,000 perspectives that I'm not aware of. And I am so limited in my understanding that curiosity is the salve for judgment, isolation, all of those things. So yes, becoming sensory, exiting fight or flight by coming into the moment and then just being curious about what presents itself.
Great. That's tangible. That's really doable. I'll be saving them. I'll be using them.
It's all we can do.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But sometimes, like, I know for me, I really will get stuck in that. Why is this happening? What is this?
Yeah.
And just like a constant thinking it through instead of stepping out of that. Sometimes it's just the simplest advice that makes the biggest difference.
Yeah. We just have to keep reminding each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have one final question, and then I just want to talk about where we can find you. But I have been learning that one of the most important parts of just becoming like your fullest self is recognizing your own beauty and your own power. So, what is it that you think is special about you? What do you like about yourself?
I think my fire, my passion, I think I repressed it for most of my life, thinking that it could burn everyone around me, that it was like, my sensitivity. So many of us tender hearts, probably anyone listening to your podcast is a tender heart. It's like, how can I feel all of this and have it not debilitate me or be harmful to other people or to make me feel like I don't belong? And the repression of that, I know led to so much of my illness. And so I am trying to see my fire as a healthy way of keeping others warm when it's only possible when I'm being compassionate with myself. So instead of thinking, oh, I'm really flying off the handle or being too much or whatever, like, those are just things other people said to me. And I'm trying to just feel into, oh, my body has a knowing that is divine. And I need to listen to her. And that fire is here for a purpose.
I love that. It's a hard question to answer when you're trying to name something great about yourself, but
Yeah.
I love to hear what people think is special about themselves. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So, for everyone listening, where can we follow you? Where can we get your books? And how can we support
Yes.
you?
Thank you. Well, you can find me on Instagram at Joy Prouty. And then my book that's out in the world now is Practicing Presence. And you can find it anywhere books are sold. It's
Okay.
on Amazon. It's in some Barnes and Nobles. You could request it at your independent bookstore so that you could be supporting your local bookseller. And then I have another book coming out in 2026. So that will be soon to be revealed.
Okay. And can anyone work with you photo-wise or no?
Yes, yes. Let's be curious about who is feeling drawn to the work. Yes. I take my work with documenting women and families really seriously. I dig into the deepest parts. So vulnerability is the nucleus of my work. Can be commissioned to travel anywhere in the United States. I'm going to be traveling a lot this year, and my travel schedule can be found on Instagram.
Okay. Amazing. Joy, I have been after you for a while, wanting to get you on here. And then I just knew like everything. I wanted to hear everything from you. And then you even over delivered on expectations.
Oh, thanks,
You were
Chelsea.
just everything I could have hoped. And you share in a way that's really powerful. And I think that this episode changes lives. And I'm really grateful you
Oh,
were here.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for chasing me down.
Anytime.
Thanks.